Welcome back to the show. I am here today with Rodolfo Dieck. He is the managing partner at Proeza Ventures, which is a VC firm focused exclusively on the mobility space. They look to partner with ambitious and visionary founders, transforming the way we think about mobility and pushing forward a more efficient, safety-focused, and environmentally friendly solutions. Rodolfo, tell me how you got into this space.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me
Yeah.
here today. It's a funny story, actually. It was serendipitous. I was doing venture capital before. I was working at the largest impact investing fund based out of Mexico City. I was doing investments mostly in healthcare and education for about 5 years there. And then from a previous relationship that I had from my investment banking days, one of my friends contacted me with the idea of launching a mobility focus fund. And we started thinking about it, and we launched it almost 4 years ago now in the summer of 2019. At the time, I was aware of Uber, Lyft, Lime. I thought, well, there's going to be probably not that many opportunities to look in the mobility space. But as we've worked these last 4 years, we've seen almost over 2,000 companies now exclusively focused on this space. So it's been a very interesting ride to date, I would say.
So what drove interest? Was it really seeing companies like Uber and Lyft, or was there is there something that changed in the world where you said mobility is going to be it?
Yeah, so it was a convergence of four things: autonomous vehicles, electric vehicles, connected cars, and shared mobility. So those four main trends is what made us think about launching this fund. And the fact that we have a single LP, a single investor in our fund. Our LP is a family-owned business based out of Monterrey, Mexico. They own three main businesses. The largest one by far is in the automotive space. The group owns a company called Metalsa, which is a tier one OEM supplier that sells frames and chassis and structural components for pickup trucks and buses. And they're the market leader here in North America in that space. So they were trying to partner with more startups, get into all these four trends that they were looking into. They decided to invest as an LP in another fund in the Bay Area, Autotech Ventures, and in their first fund. But after that, they realized they wanted to be even closer to the ecosystem, and that's why they decided to back us to launch Proeza Ventures.
And you're based in Houston, but I was looking at your portfolio, and it seems like the portfolio is international, right? Tell me a little bit about how you find all 2,000 companies.
Yeah, and that's been really exciting for us. When we set the investment thesis for the fund, we did a narrow focus on one industry, one vertical, but we kept a global scope, and that's been very advantageous for us to compare and contrast business models across different regions. So we're investing mostly across Americas, from Alaska to Patagonia, excluding Brazil, because we feel that you need local boots there to really be successful at investing and knowing your way around it. And also in Western Europe and Israel. That's where we are focusing on. In terms of where we get our deal flow, it's a variety of sources. So personal relationships that we have with other funds similar to us, attending events, in-person events, which was a challenge during the COVID times, but we did a lot of online events. Being a mentor, I'm a mentor at Techstars or other kind of accelerators and startups. Through our website, it's been an incredible source for us. We've put out content on LinkedIn and our social media, and it's been picking up traction in the last 3 years. Every time we see more companies directly contacting us through the website. And yeah, we even got a couple of deals from Instagram. So it's of all places.
This is the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, it's we have a Gen Z and millennial team, and they take care of all social media. And yeah, we've been able to source companies from a whole different places. Yeah.
It's funny because when I was fundraising 10 years ago, I was discouraged from ever trying to go down the internet route because it was always guided. You need an introduction, and I'm trying to figure out if that's because the world has changed and we're just used to inbound traffic, or is that because of your tight strategic focus that it's almost necessary to get the span you need? What's different there?
I don't know. I think it's a change also in how society works and functions, and COVID. For me, what I realized is it democratized the access to capital. A lot of funds, I mean, you hear this, like they wouldn't go outside of Sand Road Hill in Silicon Valley.
Yep.
They didn't want to be on a plane. For us, that's not an issue. We don't shy away from jumping on a plane, visiting our companies. So I think that's part of that. It's thanks to COVID, it opened up different channels to get through VCs. Usually it's better to have a warm introduction for sure. Yeah. But we have invested, I think we have 20 investments in our portfolio. At least one that I remember was an inbound that they directly contacted us.
Yeah.
So I would encourage founders to go out there. I mean, a lot of people expect you to be resourceful and find your way around things. And all the information of the VCs is out there. If you're not willing to do the work, then it also doesn't come out as a good thing as a founder. So if you have a warm intro, that's great. But if you don't, I mean, you have the contact information, you have LinkedIn, you have so many ways to reach out to people these days that it's expected from you to do that kind of work now.
Interesting. So the other thing I'm hearing is you have an Instagram, and is that personal or is that with the fund?
No, that's for the company.
Okay.
Yeah, I keep my personal one private.
So I'm curious because you're blowing my mind in some ways. What are you posting about on Instagram? Because I'm not on Instagram, so I'm just mesmerized a little bit here. But unfortunately, Laura's not here. She's on Instagram. Apparently, it's mostly cat videos. So I'm curious, what do you guys post?
Yeah. So our main social media platform has been LinkedIn.
Okay.
We usually post articles or pieces that we put together on a specific vertical within mobility. In Instagram, we've been doing articles as well, small videos of events that we go to, team pictures. We've been profiling some of the founders that we have invested in and their companies. So it's I would say those main things, and it's getting good traction. We haven't done any paid advertising. It's mostly organic. And I think we're about to hit 700 followers, something like that. So it's
nice. Good.
Probably it's mostly our fans and family. But it's we're not putting that much effort into Instagram. It's just grown naturally. And on LinkedIn, we're very active, and that's where we reach more audience or more people.
Yeah.
And we just launched our newsletter last year called The Paddock, which is also something that we're trying to do to position the fund, our investment thesis, and what's going on in the mobility space for all the founders and VCs looking to the space. We try to curate some nice content and deals that we found interesting over the last 4 weeks. So it's a monthly newsletter.
Good. And I think we talked about the vertical, but what stage do you like to invest in? And I like to caveat this by saying classifying seed and Series A, the meaning shifts every 6 months. So for you, what do you target and what are the things you look for? Is it in terms of size or risk? How do you think about it?
Yeah, like you said, it changes every 6 months and it changes on geography as well. In LATAM, it's a very different nomenclature as well. So we're coming in early. When we launched the fund, we thought about doing only Series A's. Just given how the market was doing the last few years, where the rounds just ballooned and the pre-money valuations as well, we decided to go earlier because we want to have a good ownership stake when we come in. So our average ticket size is about $1.5 million.
Okay.
We can go down to $500,000 up to $2 million in first-time ticket. We reserve enough capital for follow-ons. And we have invested in pre-revenue companies. And within mobility, we cover different sectors. We also invest in hardware. So we have invested in scooters, trucks, e-bikes, and a few other things, radars. And sometimes what we want to see is traction from a POC or a customer feedback. At least have an MVP already there, working with a customer, having some of that first validation. Because some of these companies in the space in mobility, once you get to a client, you can grow really quickly. Yeah. It's a challenge of getting there to that stage. And it takes a long time. It's usually long sales cycles. And we are aware of that given our LP and all the experience that they have working for OEMs in the US and worldwide. But yeah, I would say we come in early, seed, Series A. We can invest pre-revenue or early revenue at those stages.
Yeah. And I assume you lead in due diligence.
Yeah, so we're very open on that. We are open to lead or co-lead or be part of a syndicate. What I didn't mention is that even if we lead a round, we don't take a full round. We usually take up to like 60, 70% of any given round, we're always looking for co-investors.
Okay.
It's usually played out that we take between 50 to 60% of a round, and we try to syndicate the rest with current investors and or new investors that want to come into the cap table at that stage.
Is that a matter of helping spread the risk, or what's the thinking there?
Yeah, it's part of that. I'm bringing more leadership to the table, other investors that can co-invest with us and help the company hit their next milestones. It could be a strategic investor or other financial investor that has a different perspective than us. Maybe it's not so industry focused and brings a different kind of expertise to the table, be it a marketplace person, software as a service, or any other kind of business models that we are investing in.
You talked about how you work with different verticals. Is there a vertical within mobility that's really exciting right now? And do you, I guess if you had a recent investment that you're excited about, go ahead and tell us about it.
Sure. So we cover a big span within mobility. Something that we're very excited about right now is the EV transition. So there's a lot of convergence for mobility with other industries that wasn't the case a few years ago or decades ago, like energy, mining, logistics, and a few others. They're all converging with mobility, and we see a big opportunity in that space. So one of the recent investments that we did, it's called a company called Def Power, based in the Netherlands. The company is providing a premium charging app for fleet operators. It's a white label solution that allows fleets to provide services for their clients, to know where to charge, how much it's going to cost, and to have automatic billing. Because this is in Europe, they have connected over 450,000 chargers in Europe. So when you charge across countries, then you have to take care of all the tax implications of that. So they're making it very seamless to have a single invoice. And to have a valid invoice. There's a lot of issues going on right now with invoicing the charging sessions in Europe. And that's like the first stage that the company is going after. But the thought here is they're going to provide smart charging services, which they're already doing in Norway, to charge when the energy is cleaner or cheapest, and then eventually do vehicle-to-grid services as well. The tagline is free charging for life. So you having that car with that battery, you should be able to make money out of it. So if you plug your car into the grid and at some point you either stop charging because the grid asks you to do, or you want to send power back to the grid, you are going to be compensated for that. And then you're going to make enough money that you're going to have the charging for free throughout the year.
Oh, I see.
So that's kind of the concept that they're going after. And it's a very experienced team. We really like them. They are serial entrepreneurs. They founded Plug Surfing, which was an app to find the most available charger near you. And their co-founder, the CTO, he used to run Allego, one of the CPOs in Europe. So we're very excited about that company, where it's going. We invested in their seed round, but they bootstrapped for a long time, and they have developed the product to a stage where they have already marquee customers on board. So we're very, very excited about that opportunity.
One of the things I'm seeing that's interesting just in data in general, and I think you touched on it, was timing use of power with carbon intensity of the power grid. And I think the nuance here is when we say there's either IoT or there's data everywhere, this is this kind of other underlying trend of how we get to net zero, right? Like the way we were able to measure and manage and enabling fleets to do that is just something we could not have even imagined 10 years ago. And I'm finding for a lot of these technologies, that ends up being a really powerful, unique selling point, is just providing that information, because we couldn't get it before.
Exactly.
So glad they're doing it. And I know Europe obviously is driving a lot of the adoption of measurement around. I think that would be a Scope 3 emission, I guess, is the way to think about it. So that's very, very interesting. And so one of the things you also talked about with them is it's a platform that's B2B, but they're not necessarily doing the hardware. That's kind of a software layer. But you actually have another company that's doing the charging systems as well, right?
Yeah. So that's another investment that we did last year in 2022. A company called Electric Era, based in Seattle. former SpaceX engineers that launched the company. What they're providing, it's a whole ecosystem. They call it the power node. It's the hardware. It's a battery storage solution to be able to deploy fast chargers across the United States. And with the hardware, they're also doing the power node operating system, the OS, which allows, right now their beachhead market is convenience stores, the 120,000 convenience stores in the US that want to provide this kind of service. And just taking a step back, like the main thing there is to provide a good user experience. So as a user as a driver, you know how the experience works when you go and refill your gas tank. And right now it's really hard to do that for EVs because most of the times the chargers don't work or there's limited availability of chargers. You don't know where they're at. They're VC or being occupied by someone else. So it's been a challenge to provide a good UX in that space. And Electric Era is solving that for C-stores by providing the whole ecosystem with the battery storage solution and the operating system that allows them to manage the grid and the whole site. They can deploy between 4 to 6 chargers in their site. And with their operating system, they can manage the load and make it more efficient and more affordable and provide a reliable source of energy for fast charging.
Yeah. No, I was at the, I think it was the Empower conference run by the Digital Wildcatter guys here. And one of the things that came up in one of the EV sessions was the hardware all works, but kind of the failure point is getting the plugged in, getting the little computer and car to talk, and layered on top of that, getting your credit card to process.
Exactly.
And
payment is an issue as well.
Right. And that's what makes it frustrating for someone where you're just used to the gas station, just kind of, it just works. Yeah. And I think when we talk about EVs, most people focus on the range anxiety, but the very practical day-to-day is you might be at the station, and if you just can't get the thing to charge, you're still stuck. Exactly. Right. And so I can see that being a very unintended barrier to entry in terms of people wanting to have a good user experience.
Yeah, those are the two main barriers, like the range anxiety and having a good UX. Because another issue that happens is you might get to a charger that works, you're able to connect, but you don't get the power that you're expecting to get. So you plug in and you're expecting to get, if it's a fast charger, to get within 20 minutes, 80% charge, and it doesn't work that way. You get, 20, 30%. And then it creates an even worse experience, and you get more range anxiety, and it creates a bad cycle.
Yeah. Interesting. So when you think about the transition into like EVs, like obviously there's a very big change happening just with the adoption generally. But think about like the startups you are seeing. What are the challenges that you think they're facing that maybe were different from a decade ago?
I think most of the challenges remain the same. For me, the main objective for a founder should focus on three main things. Setting the strategy of the company, having a company or startup well capitalized, so fundraising, and bringing on board the right team in the right positions. So those challenges remain no matter where the technology is going. All founders are going to face those. And now I think what's changing, it's like we were talking previously, is just how different industries are intersecting with each other. So I think that the challenge there is to know how you play within all these sectors and who your stakeholders are, so that you make sure that the problem that you're going after and your solution really addresses the needs of all these people. So it's getting more challenging, especially in mobility, and we see it. You have to deal with regulators, and a lot of investors really want to shy away from that. It's hard. You have to deal with utilities. You have to deal with OEMs. You have to deal with dealerships. So there's so many stakeholders around the table that you really need to find the place where you can bring the most value and create a successful company.
Yeah. And it's not like those stakeholders are new. Is it just that because the intersections are more intense?
The way they're interacting and how the pie is shifting, like who owns the customer, the customer at the end of the day. That's something that OEMs are trying to get closer to.
Yeah.
So it's the OEMs, it's and all the service providers. The technology companies also that are providing all the technology that goes into the vehicle, who's going to end up owning that relationship, and just the dynamics as to how the pie of the profits is being split.
Gotcha.
That's going to be a challenge. For instance, we were talking about charging. How is that going to be split? Who's going to take the money? The utility, the EV driver, the OEM, because it's their battery, it's the car. So it's still something that is being worked out in the industry and in the different spaces that we're playing in. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out in the next few years.
Yeah, and so and for those who don't know, an OEM is the manufacturer of the vehicles, right?
Yep.
And so one of the major disruptions is like Tesla decided to go direct to customers, and part of that is a change in how we manage and service, or the auto industry manages and services, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's changing everything. In
yeah,
many
and a
ways.
few other OEMs have announced that they're planning to do something similar.
Yeah.
But it's hard because they have the legacy dealership system. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out.
We'll see how it evolves. Yeah. Okay. Are there some things that are easier today? I think we talked about fundraising you can kind of do online now, but there are other things that are easier with the commercialization process.
Yeah, I think, the cost of launching a business or startup has gone down significantly over the last decade. You have all these software providers and the cloud that's made it cheaper to launch a business. So in that way, I think it's easier to get an MVP out there and not burn through a lot of cash before having some initial indication if you're in the right direction. Also, the availability of talent. I think more people are expressing more interest in becoming entrepreneurs. Right now, we're seeing some layoffs in tech companies, and that's bringing more talented people into the pool of launching businesses or going into a startup, helping build something else. So there's certainly some things that have gotten easier. There's a lot of dry powder as well. When you talk to industry experts, they mention all the billions of dollars that are available to deploy. Some of that, I would say, it's already earmarked for portfolio companies as follow-on investments. And right now, we're seeing a little bit of a slowdown. VCs and investors are like us. We're waiting to see where the market ends up. So nobody wants to invest if it's still going to go down a little bit. So right now, it's being harder to raise at the Series A and B, I would say. Not so much at the seed. We still see a very active market in that space. But it's also easier to get access to financing and more people willing to invest from different geographies like ourselves. And that's something that we owe to how we transition as a society to moving online in the last couple of years.
Good. So we're here in Houston, and you said you moved to Houston.
Yep.
What drove you? What brought you here? Yeah.
Yeah, so if I'm completely honest, it was more a personal decision. My wife has her 4 sisters here in town. She's a twin sister.
Okay.
And the twin sister carries a lot of weight in the relationship.
Oh, yes.
So that's the main reason we moved here. But also from a work standpoint, Texas has been very open to testing autonomous vehicles. It's one of the states that has allowed companies like Nuro and a few others in Kodiak and a few others, autonomous trucks, Gatic as well, to test their vehicles on the roads. And also just given the legacy that Texas has of being a big oil and gas state and how all the big players are here pushing the EV transition as well. You have Chevron, BP, Saudi Aramco, Shell, all their CVCs are based here in Houston, and they're looking at how to be a part of that transition. Otherwise, their businesses are gonna, they're gonna be stale. So it's a very exciting ecosystem. It's I think from a VC standpoint, it's still in its infancy years, but you see a lot of more effort from current VCs, and there's the Texas Halo Fund. And a few other initiatives that are pushing for more investment in Texas, and specifically in Houston. You have already a more flourishing ecosystem in Austin, but it's a great city to be in. I think there's a lot of things happening in this space, in healthcare, and a few others as well.
Yeah. I think I looked at your portfolio. Have you sourced and invested in a company from Houston yet?
We have seen plenty of companies in Texas. Have not invested in one just yet.
Okay.
It's.
We got to up our game. That's what I'm hearing.
No, we've seen a few, to be honest. Probably more than a dozen. Way more than that, but we haven't invested in one just yet.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a good combination of like the strategic investors are looking for ways to continue to be really strong players in the energy ecosystem. And Texas itself is very supportive of autonomous driving. Are there any like hidden gems within the innovation ecosystem that founders and investors should know about, just within Houston?
Within Houston, well, I think there's a lot of talent here as well.
Yeah.
I've been going to a couple of events now that things open up again, and I've been impressed by the people that are here. It's a very diverse city. You have people from everywhere with very different backgrounds and expertise. So I think it's a great place to start a business. I think there's a lot of incentives as well, tax wise, and a few other incentives to launch a business. And it's a vibrant ecosystem. It's flourishing. So and it's better in terms of cost of living, and you have other amenities around that for from your personal side of things that make it an interesting place to be here and launch your next startup.
Do you find portfolio companies set up offices in Houston, or think about that as part of their growth plan?
We have companies that have commercial relationships here in Dallas, Houston, a few other cities, San Antonio. I think, well, one of them has an office in Austin. They hired their development team in Austin. But yeah, it's mostly more commercial relationships that are establishing here with fleets or other kind of customers.
Yep. We find there's a good number of international companies when they think about entering the U.S. It's Houston and Texas because it's easier to set up and run a business here, and also good access to the port if you're bringing in manufactured goods.
Exactly.
So it's definitely makes it an interesting and diverse city.
Yeah, sure. And we've seen companies from LATAM. As I mentioned, we're investing in Mexico, Colombia, a few other countries. And they see Texas as a natural extension because you have a big chunk of the population here that speaks Spanish. So catering to that population, it's always a very attractive opportunity to go after.
Yeah, I was thinking. I heard you say earlier you look at deals all the way down to Patagonia.
Yeah,
and I was thinking, okay, there's a story there. Is there companies that have come out from that far that were interesting or you're willing to share?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of companies from Chile and Argentina. We haven't invested in one just yet. We did put a term sheet in one, but it fell through. But yeah, it's a lot of innovation coming out of Chile as well. I mean, the Corner Shop came out of there. I don't know if you heard of them. Uber bought them. It's a grocery delivery service for Latin America. Uber bought it last year or a year and a half ago now. And there's a few other companies coming out of the region that are very exciting. Mostly targeting all of LATAM, but also expanding into the US. I think there's another one, like an insurtech play from Chile, Betterfly, that is also, I think it's in unicorn status now as well. Wow. In Argentina, it's a little bit of a challenge just because of the political nature of the country. But there's very good founders that have established their companies in the US or elsewhere in Mexico. And we are keeping a close eye on them. Most companies that are founded in South America, other than Brazil, are always looking to build a regional play to go into Brazil or Mexico, which are the two largest markets in LATAM, and then to expand north to the US.
And I know you mentioned Brazil. You don't necessarily focus there. Is that there's obviously different language, or so is there that language barrier, or is it also because Brazil is such a big market they don't have the entrepreneurs don't look outside?
Yeah, it's a huge market, and like you said, we're focusing on Spanish-speaking LATAM. In Brazil, it's Portuguese, so there's a cultural barrier there, and it's a bigger market, but I think it's 30% bigger in terms of GDP from Mexico. But it's a very developed market in terms of VC. In venture capital, it's more developed, and you need to know your way around the local laws. It's hard to, they have different labor laws and how to run a business. So you really need to know your way around it and have local boots. Otherwise, for me personally, it would be hard to invest from outside looking into Brazil.
Got it.
And that's why we have decided not to focus on that part of the world just yet.
Yeah. And so I was also interested in how you said there are a number of companies coming out of Chile, and I've definitely met a fair share where they're bringing innovation and landing in Houston. Is that a new phenomenon? Like what's changed where Chile is producing a lot of these entrepreneurs, or have I just not been paying attention?
No, I think it was the last 2 years there was a big boom for LATAM. A lot of VC funds in the US started looking at the region
Okay.
because it's huge. We have a huge population, very high internet penetration, smartphone penetration, and we have kind of different challenges that developed countries have, but where technology can be applied to solve pressing issues in healthcare, education, mobility, across different verticals, especially in financial services. That's one of the sectors that has blossomed the most in LATAM. And it's been interesting to see how it has flourished in the last few years. There's been efforts from local governments. One of the good things that they have done is develop the VC ecosystem. It's still nascent. I think here in the US, it represents about 1% of the GDP or a little bit more than that. In LATAM, I think we're close to 0.2, 0.3%. So there's still a long way to go. But there's been incentives in place to launch funds that then go on and support entrepreneurs. And as new generations come out of school, they're preferring to go and work in a startup than a consulting gig or investment banking, which were the traditional go-to places after college. They're thinking about, why don't I join this startup, or why don't I found my own company and go after a certain opportunity? So it's been really good to see. I've been investing 10 years now. When I first started back in like 2013, 2014, you didn't see that many entrepreneurs. It was the usual suspects. People that came out from a banking job or another privileged position trying to launch a startup. Now it's not so much the case. You see people coming out of college trying to do things in a different way. And it's something that we have to instill more and educate people more in Mexico. Like, for instance, on a personal note, when I graduated from college back in 99, that's a long time, I told my parents I want to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to launch a pizza business. And they're like, you're crazy. We're not going to support you. I mean, if you think you can make enough money doing that, go ahead. But if not, you should just get a corporate job. And it was hard. It was seen, if you started something on your own, something small, it was seen as a bad thing. Like you weren't able to get the nice job at a big corporate in your hometown. And now that's not the case anymore. So that's changed significantly over the years.
Yeah, no, and I can relate. So I my mother's Asian, and a lot of times in our community, if you graduated and did not pursue a professional career like a doctor or a lawyer, it meant you were a failure. And pursuing entrepreneurship is a real barrier because the cultural expectations.
Exactly.
Right. And so I definitely relate, especially when you have parents who kind of put it all on the line to make a better life and bring you to a place like the US. It's challenging to say, I'm going to take all the risk and I become an entrepreneur. But there's definitely a different thrill that comes from building businesses that I think is hard to translate.
Yeah, and the culture of dealing with failure, it's not instilled in LATAM. It's you think you're going to have like the scarlet letter, that you're not going to be able to do anything else after if you fail launching a business, which is not the case in the US. I think a lot of funds that I speak to or other GPs or friends, they prefer a two-time failed entrepreneur than a first-time entrepreneur, because the guy that has tried it before knows what not to do. So he's closer to getting it right. Whereas in LATAM, a few years ago, I don't know if that has changed so much, but if you failed, you were like, this guy didn't know how to do it. And you might have like a hard time relaunching or rebuilding yourself up,
Yeah, I think especially within Houston, there's that acceptance that sometimes things are very tough, and it's more important how you handle failure than being successful or failing multiple times.
Yeah.
And I think that's a uniquely Houstonian ethos. So I definitely appreciate that. When we think about professionals, you were talking about even in Latin America, it's more acceptable to enter the career within the energy transition. How should people think about making that change here to either get into mobility if they want to transition careers? What should they look for in a startup?
As something that wants to join, someone that wants to join a startup, Well, I think at the early stage of your career, you're more you have availability of taking on more risk.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something. The first thing that you should look into is if there is alignment in the vision
Mm-hmm.
that the company is going after. If you share the values that the founding team has and what they're trying to take the company to.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's, for me, that's the most important thing, and that's something that I hear from millennials and Gen Zs, is that they're focusing on. They don't care so much about the money per se or the career path, but more so about if the company they're working for aligns with their values and their vision of how the world should function. And I think that's still very important. That's the number one thing. Then, if you're trying to get into a more like senior position or like the C-suite within a startup, obviously you need to look into how well funded they are. What kind of culture is part of aligning with values. You find a good culture within that startup, but also how well funded they are. They're willing to provide options to you to have some upside, and to know that you have at least, I don't know, 12, 24 months of runway to really try hard and go for it. And if it doesn't work, move on to the next thing. But have enough capital in the company to be part of the team and join and help them get to the next stage. Knowing what their traction is what kind of customer they're going after, if there's something you can bring to the table to help accelerate that. And connections and your willingness to work hard with that startup. Working at a startup is hard work. There's a few hands around, and sometimes you have to play so many different roles within a company. And you have to be willing to pull your sleeves and work long hours. And sometimes you're going to be working really hard, not making enough money, and having uncertainty that it might not work.
Yeah.
And that's now that I mentioned, it's something that's really important. You need to know how to deal with uncertainty.
Yeah.
Working with a startup, we see startups pitching us. We have seen startup pitches like 3 years ago. We see the decks today, and they have pivoted so many times, and then they're doing something completely different. The ones that haven't died, obviously, some have died, and some others have found another product market fit, but in a different space where they were aiming to go after. So dealing with that uncertainty as part of a founding team or one of the first employees in these companies, it's hard.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to deal with that because it can take a toll on you and your mental health as well.
Yeah, and so that's why sometimes it's good to go to the values because and the problem you're trying to solve, because the values don't change, even if the product market fit may evolve.
Exactly. Yeah, totally true. I agree on
that. So when we think about kind of the energy transition that's coming, are there any gaps you see where maybe like we as a society need to put more investment to kind of hit our energy transition goals over the next 20 years?
Yeah, I think we had talked about vehicles here, but we're missing a big chunk of the market if we don't talk about walking, biking, or using micromobility for transport goods and people around. I think we're used to seeing vehicles on our roads all the time, and that's why we think about vehicles turning now to electric vehicles, which makes sense, and it's a good way to push that transition. But we need to think about ways in which we can move things and people around in a more efficient way. Vehicles that weigh less, like I think it's 70% of the trips are less than 5 miles. So do you really need an SUV that weighs, 1,000 kilos to go to the supermarket and get groceries? Probably not. You can have a cargo bike or a small electric vehicle that has a lesser footprint. It might make sense. So I think we need to think about infrastructure to promote the other kinds of mobility, other mobility nodes. And also to push for companies that some in Europe are already doing this, and a little bit in the US in certain cities, thinking about different ways to deliver goods to people and move people around. I know Amazon, DHL, FedEx have tried e-cargo bikes in different parts of the world with good success. It's a better way to move around, more efficient, faster, and greener, obviously. So there's so many things that we can do beyond cars that it's also very exciting for us. And we have invested a lot in micromobility and looking at that space. I think there is about 10 times as many electric scooters and mopeds as there are electric vehicles in the world. I think in India and Southeast Asia, they have transitioned to EVs, their moped and scooter fleets. It's almost 60-70% of their fleets now are electric. And we expect to see that in other parts of the world, in LATAM, in the US as well. Sometimes sitting in my home here in Houston, I think about that and how that could happen in a city like Houston.
Yeah.
And it's hard just given how spread out it is and how highways are a main focus point of the city. But if you move around your neighborhood, you can move easily in a different kind of vehicle. I've been thinking about getting an e-cargo bike or a golf cart. I've seen a few parents take their kids on a golf cart to their school with its electric. And just going to Randall's and get my groceries in an electric vehicle. I don't have to drive my minivan that I have because I have 3 kids. It doesn't make sense to go for a 1 mile drive and get groceries. I could go another way and improve the way in which the world works and make it greener, you know.
Yeah. One of the things that struck me, and I'm just thinking, I'm going to be visiting New York for fun in a few weeks. And I went right after COVID things opened up. And I was amazed how many e-bikes were there for just all the delivery people. Because it just didn't make any sense anymore to drive. Didn't make sense to use a moped. But everyone had the same like first gen e-bike with the big chunky battery. And they were just everywhere. And that clearly works in a city like New York, where it is hard to use a car. And translating that to less dense cities it is a real challenge, because New York is a singular place.
Exactly.
But if you go and see it, you can see like this is how this changes. I have an e-bike. I try to ride, but here in Houston, my number one concern is, am I going to get stuck in the rain? Or am I going to sweat so much that I'm not going to be presentable?
It's very warm out
there.
Yeah,
right. And one of the like secrets of an e-bike is sometimes you don't have to pedal if it's too hot. But I still have that barrier where I won't go to HEB to go pick up groceries yet, because I don't have a cargo bike. And so we end up taking the car if it's convenient on the way home. So it's a very real mental challenge that we need to overcome. But I have no excuses. It's like a 6-minute bike ride. Like I don't have an excuse.
You see, we're just so used to just jumping on our cars and make it life easier. But there's other ways to do that. But yeah, cities like LA, Houston, a few others, we need to think about that, or maybe improve public transportation and have people ride shared mobility as well, or autonomous shuttles, which they're being tested out right now in Europe. I think it's still a long ways from being deployed on a mass scale on the streets, but that's another way that we can move people around in a more efficient way. Instead of having single occupancy vehicles driving, I don't know, 70-80% of the trips below 5 miles. It just doesn't make sense. And if we transition the whole current fleet of ICE vehicles, of combustion engine vehicles right now to electric, it's going to help, but not that much. We're going to still have congestion and a few other issues that we're not going to get to our targets of net zero in the next decade.
So we're going to start wrapping up because of time. When we think about the audience that's listening here, what are things they could do to help you in your goals?
We are very excited about the transition in the mobility space. So if there's any entrepreneurs looking to launch or that have launched a business in this space, or other investors or corporates that are looking into how to fit into this new world in the mobility space, give us a call. I mean, we have our social media. We're very active there. We have our email in the website, or subscribe at least to our newsletter, The Paddock, where you can find a lot of information that we think it's interesting and relevant for what we're trying to push, which is a more efficient way of moving people and goods around.
So I'll put the website in the show notes, but can you spell out the website for us so people can find you?
Sure. It's Proeza, Proeza Ventures.com.
Okay, cool. And as we wrap, is there any parting thoughts you want to share with the entrepreneurs and the audience in the world?
I would just say there's a lot of noise out there in terms of fundraising, and that is going to be a challenging year or next 2 years. But I would tell you not to that shouldn't detract you from keep pushing forward. That's something that we're saying in the mobility space. Obviously, I'm biased. I I have mobility for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and we have several entrepreneurs that we have backed. But there's a lot of noise, and I think we just need to see this as a small blip in the road. And there's still a lot of capital available. Just getting to the right people and the right decision makers, and to bring the solutions to market. So I would try to end this on a positive note, saying that we still see a very bright future for this space, and how it is impacting the transition to a cleaner environment.
Good. Thank you. That's it.